Okay, so now we're moving on to our next session, which is a case study from the Tiwi Islands, where Indigenous knowledge is being applied to research on ant biodiversity. And the title of this is Ngapangimarri, ngini, waliwalinga, ngirramini, How Ants Can Inform Land Use and Management on the Tiwi Islands. And we're being joined by Kinjia Munkara-Murray, who's a Tiwi and Rembarrnga woman completing a Masters of Bioscience here at the University of Melbourne. It's a great pleasure to have you join us, Kinjia. I'll hand it over to you now. Kinjia will speak for about 10 minutes and then is happy to take questions for the next 10 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much for that. Hi everyone, I'm Kinjia Munkara-Murray. I'm a Tiwi and Rembarrnga woman, and I'm completing a Master of Bioscience at the University of Melbourne. And first, before anything else, I'd like to do an acknowledgement in Tiwi. Ngapangimarri, Larakia, Murakapuni, Nua Arakatumanui, Nua Murakapuni. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking on Larakia country today, and I'd like to acknowledge other First Nation peoples here and the lands that they come from. So in this presentation, I'm going to describe my research project to you all first, and then I'll explain how it fits into the Tiwi knowledge system and how it can inform decision-making on the Tiwi Islands. Okay, so now I'm just going to bring out my presentation. Okay, can everyone see that? Take that as a yes. Cool. All right. So I first learned about the concept of an ecosystem from my family, an ecosystem being this interconnected web of plants and animals that interact with each other and their environment. I learned this from my mother, who tells me that she learned it from her mother, my grandmother, or my Ngapangimarri. And now my Ngapangimarri was very knowledgeable in a vast variety of things, but one thing she was particularly renowned for was having an incredible knowledge about birds. She knew a lot about birds and their relationship to other animals and to their environment, and particularly their behaviour. She knew what their behaviour could indicate about other events occurring in that same ecosystem. And so ever since I was small, I've personally always been fascinated by insects. As soon as I could walk and grab things, I was always trying to get my hands on insects. And I spent some time growing up on Bathurst Island as a young child, and I was particularly fascinated by the insects that were living there. And I knew that I always wanted to learn more about them. And so 2 years ago, while I was finishing off my Bachelor of Science, I reached out to a scientist, Alan Anderson from Charles Darwin University, who has conducted a lot of research with ants on the Tiwi Islands. And I told him that I was interested in doing a master's project on insects on Bathurst Island. And so fast forward to now, and within a master's project under the supervision of that same Alan Anderson and Michael McCarthy from the University of Melbourne, I have completed the first systematic survey of ants from Bathurst Island. All right, so you've heard me talk about Bathurst Island and Tiwi Islands. So the Tiwi Islands refers to a group of islands, 2 big ones and a couple of smaller ones. And Bathurst Island is the second largest island. So, and that's where I'm from, and that's where I've been conducting my research. And over the last year and a half, I've collected ants from 22 different places across Chickalaro country here on the left and Mantiyupwi country here on the right. And Chickalaro is my family's country, and Mantiyupwi is a related clan group that we have close cultural ties with. And so that's why I've chosen to collect my ants from these places in particular. So my uncle Mario Munkara helped me to find many of these sites based on his ecological knowledge of different habitat types. And so these sites cover a range of habitats, including rainforest, woodland, and swamp. And I collected ants from different niches within these habitats using specialized traps. And I've actually got a photo here on the right of a tree trap. So there's like a trap there on the side of a tree. But yeah, I had special traps for collecting ants from trees, from underground, and from leaf litter. And the research aims of this project are pretty much the following. I wanted to know what waliwalinga are living on Bathurst Island, both native and invasive. I wanted to know what habitats and plants they are associated with, and how diverse and abundant they are, and in what ways they care for Murakapuni, or our country. And so some of the results of this research so far is that from 19,110 waliwalinga, I've identified 150 species from 40 genera across 22 sites using these 4 trapping methods. And unfortunately, some of these ants were introduced pest species, such as the Singapore ant and the black crazy ant. So how does this project fit into the Tiwi knowledge system? Well, Ngapangimarri is a Tiwi word which means to learn or know something through the scientific method. And when we think about the conventional scientific method as being something that involves observation and hypothesizing, experimentation, critically analyzing the results of that experimentation, and then sharing that information, this is something that Tiwi people have engaged with on all levels throughout our history, and we continue to engage with the scientific method to this day. And from a purely ecological perspective, there are Tiwi people who have specializations in birds, like my maninga, my grandmother, but also, specializations in plants or marine animals or any number of things. And these specializations directly inform decisions regarding land management and resource management. So why is it important to understand waliwalinga, ants? Because of the many essential roles that they fulfill in our environment. Certain waliwalinga have co-evolved with plants to disperse their seeds in return for food. You can see here a picture of an ant dispersing a seed. And in addition to this, they're also prolific pollinators and regulators of animal and plant-related biodiversity. They aerate and enrich the soil around them with nitrogen and other nutrients, and they can help to moderate soil pH. And because of this hugely critical role that they occupy within the environment, they can be utilised as bioindicators of environmental impacts from fire or mining, and we can also use them to measure the bioaccumulation of heavy metals. So how does this project actually benefit decision-making? Well, as a Tiwi person with specialised knowledge about waliwalinga, it's my responsibility to share this knowledge with decision makers on the Tiwi Islands, because the Tiwi Islands are rich in resources that we have every right to utilise if we wish to do so. But as with any decision-making process, these decisions need to be fully informed by scientific understanding, particularly regarding any environmental impacts of resource development. And in addition to the ecological role, certain waliwalinga also have medicinal properties for Tiwi people, so maintaining access to this medicine is essential. And, I think about how, as we head into an uncertain environmental future, it is most important for our island nation to be knowledgeable and prepared for what could come. And waliwalinga are just one part of that living ecosystem that is keeping our country healthy, but they are an absolutely integral part. Ngapangimarri, ngini, waliwalinga, ngirramini, which means we know the ant's story or history. And now that I know about these ants, I have a responsibility to share that story, because I'm doing this project for me and for my family and for the benefit of all Tiwi people. But I couldn't have done it without the University of Melbourne and Charles Darwin University, which have both supported me as a Tiwi woman to conduct scientific research that directly benefits all Tiwi people. So I hope that these academic institutions and others like them will continue to provide the support and resources for Indigenous scientists to excel in research that supports their communities. Because I think this is a really powerful way to impact decision-making with an approach that utilises both Indigenous and non-Indigenous knowledge. So thank you for listening to my presentation. And let me know if you have any questions. Cool.
Thanks very much. That was a really exciting presentation to hear about, because it really tells us about this important work that you've been doing, working between and across First Nations science and Western science. I'm happy to take questions from the audience or in the chat. I haven't got any coming up yet, so perhaps I can ask you, how do universities need to change to enable these kinds of different scientific knowledges to come together? You talked a bit about resourcing. Are there any other structural barriers you think universities need to address so more people like yourself can do this important work?
Yeah, most definitely. I think another area that needs improvement is the sort of philosophical acceptance and understanding of Indigenous science. I find that some people in science still struggle with the concept of Indigenous science as being its own thing and as being something that is valid in its own right in addition to Western science. So I think that from that philosophical standpoint, this is something that universities could work on, accepting Indigenous knowledge as its own thing. Yeah, Indigenous science is its own thing.
Thanks. Are there any questions in the audience? Yes, Lisa.
Hi, and thank you so much for that presentation. It was wonderful, and congratulations on identifying 150 different species of ant through your research. It's amazing. But I was really struck by the way that you spoke about working with, I think you said it was your uncle, to identify the habitats in which you could locate these 150 species. And I'm not sure whether your research is at this stage yet, but are you able to say anything about the ways in which your uncle or your mother or other people in the communities that you're working with speak about these ants and how they understand the differences and similarities between these ants, and whether that's at the species level or in what particular ways you've come to understand the local ways of talking about and knowing these ants?
I think, something that really struck me is one of my aunties said to me, she said, I'd love to be able to show Tiwi children what these ants look like. I'd love to have photos that show them up close. Like, we want to see what their faces look like. We want to be able to put a name and a face to these ants. And so that gives me the sense of understanding that Tiwi people, we know about these ants and we love these ants, but we've never really, had the opportunity to see them up close, like through macro photography, for example. And so I think that, this is an incredible opportunity, perhaps, when I'm sharing some of these species with Tiwi people, I think it's an incredible opportunity for me to perhaps show some of this macro photography so that Tiwi people can see their faces, so that they can put faces and names to these ants. Because at the moment, from what we can see with the naked eye, that really limits how much we can separate ants. But once you can see them up close, you can really start to differentiate them. So I hope that sort of answers your question, and that at the moment, Tiwi people were sort of, able to look at ants with the naked eye and be like, yep, that's that ant and that ant and that ant. But I think that with this research, we'll be able to go a step further and actually, start looking at ants at a really, high level of detail and clarity. So, yeah.
Great, thanks very much.
So just following up from that, what is your favourite waliwalinga and why?
Wow, what a great question. I think, so the green ant, I don't know how many people are familiar with the green ant or like the weaver ant. There's some people have made a gin out of it. So I don't know if you guys know about it, but this weaver ant it's the most dominant ant that I've found in my research. I've found it at pretty much every site and in the most dominant numbers. And what really strikes me about these ants is if you've ever come across a green ant nest, you'll see them, they'll all get up, on their back legs, and they're like looking and they're like, what's going on? Like, they're ready to defend their nest to their death. Like, they're just really charismatic and very brave. Like they will literally go to all lengths to defend their nest and their queen. And I really respect that. Like, these ants are, so tiny, like they're just, not even bigger than my pinky finger, and it would go all out to attack me to defend its nest. I don't know, I think there's something really admirable about that sort of level of bravery. So yes, the green ant would be my favourite ant.
Thanks very much. We've got a question from online from Kate, who is thrilled to hear that there's a Tiwi word for learning or knowing something through the scientific method, and has asked whether you can please expand on any Tiwi scientific methods or frameworks that you've used in this research.
Look, I think one of the biggest aspects of Ngapangimarri is naming things, because obviously language is so intimately connected with all of our knowledge systems. So there is a lot of importance, with me. Even today in this presentation, using the word waliwalinga has a lot of importance to us, because naming things, that gives them their place. So I've been implementing Tiwi language throughout my research, and it's going to be a component within my thesis as well. So that's something I think is a huge aspect of Tiwi science, is giving things their proper name.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do at all through the thesis process, given timelines, and it's really important work that you're doing there, and hopefully we can see more people doing this kind of cross-cultural scientific research. Can you please join me in thanking Kinjia for what has been a fantastic presentation and discussion?
Thank you, everyone.
I think we could all hear much more about waliwalinga, but unfortunately we have to keep moving with the schedule. Thanks very much.